From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, 3 people have died and at least 7 others have been taken to hospital at a care home in Dorset. Police have confirmed they're looking at carbon monoxide poisoning as their main line of inquiry. LBC's Joseph Draper is there.
Long ago, I saw another ambulance rush to the scene with its blue lights on, and an elderly woman I saw carried away on a stretcher from a local church here, where I'm told around 50 staff and residents are sheltering.
5 people have been killed in an apparent terror attack in Turkey at the headquarters of a defence and aerospace company. A loud explosion was reportedly heard at the site in Ankara. The Met Police Commissioner has welcomed the announcement that firearms officers charged over the shooting of a suspect will be kept anonymous. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says their identity will be protected unless they're convicted. A new drug which slows down the early stages of Alzheimer's isn't suitable for widespread use on the NHS in England. The health spending watchdog says donanemab doesn't currently demonstrate value for the health service. And the King's arrived in Samoa. He and the Queen will spend 3 days in the Pacific nation, which is hosting a meeting of Commonwealth leaders. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed down 47 points at 82.58. The pound buys $1.29 and €1.20. LBC weather, dry for England and Wales tonight. Patchy rain in northwest Scotland and a high of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening and welcome to Cross Question. It's 8 on LBC. Joining me on the panel today, to my left, Thangam Debbonaire, who's chair of the Labour Women's Network, former Labour MP. Next to her, Jerome Mayhew, Conservative Shadow Business Minister and MP for Broadland and Fakenham. I am indeed a constituent of his. In fact, I'm also a constituent of your late father's. So
yeah, that's right.
Double whammy. So got to be nice to you. Jess Brown-Fuller is with us, Liberal Democrat MP for Chichester. She's health spokesperson for the party. Defeated Gillian Keegan, the former Education Secretary at the last election. And Katy Searle, former head of BBC Westminster, now a partner at Coulson Partners. She joins us too, and we would love to take your calls. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on the same number or text 84850 or say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to our first caller. It's James in Chelsea. James, hi, what would you like to ask?
Hi, evening panel. Is it right that Donald Trump is accusing Labour of meddling in the US election?
Thangam Debbonaire, have you ever meddled in a US election?
I've not meddled in a US election. I actually wanted to donate to the Obama campaign, and I was told very firmly you're not allowed to because you're not an American citizen. Quite right too. But I've never campaigned in an American election. But I think the trouble with politicians and political activists and political members is we like elections. It's part of our drug.
We're weird.
It's what we do. We're weird. We are. We love them. We seek them out. I love them even when I lose. And so I do.
Now, that is taking it to the extreme, isn't it?
You can have fun even on a losing campaign, I can promise you.
I never have.
Did you not?
No, because of these pesky Liberal Democrats.
Sorry, we get everywhere when Japanese knotweed.
But let's be serious on this, because there is a case to answer here, isn't there? Because the message that Labour's Director of Operations put on LinkedIn has been deleted, which indicates that there was something wrong in it.
Well, I mean, I think it sounds like from the reporting of it, I didn't see the message, but the reporting of it sounds like it was just a really badly worded post. And, members are from all sorts of parties going to campaign in the American elections. Some of them will be campaigning for some Tories, or Reform members might be campaigning for the Republicans, for all I know. But, staying in another volunteer's house and doing some door knocking, it's not glamorous for most people, but it is one of the things that we political people love doing.
But it clearly was being coordinated by the Labour Party. I think that's the problem that there is here.
I don't think so. I mean, I think, it's a bit rich of Donald Trump to start complaining about the way elections are run. I mean, he was the one that said that he'd been cheated out of winning last time when he hadn't, and then complained that the courts were taking him to court for doing actually illegal things, which he was, eventually tried for. It's a bit rich when someone like Donald Trump wants to start calling rules. I don't suppose that he even knows really much about what's going on here at all. I know that we are a democracy, and the Labour government, to make the serious point, the Labour government, my colleagues in the Labour Party, will work with whoever wins that election in a couple of weeks' time. I am personally heartily sick of it and want it to be over.
The problem is, you may be prepared to work for them, or will they be prepared to work for you?
That's up to him. He should be. We're a democratically elected government as well.
That's true, but he's also our most significant ally.
Well, America
really matters.
is, not Donald Trump.
Yes.
But if, and it is an if, Donald Trump becomes the next president of the US, then we have to have a position where the United Kingdom government can work with him.
Agreed.
And that issues of the Labour Party are not held against the position of this country. And I look at this LinkedIn post, I've got it in front of me, and it comes from Sophia Patel, and it's head of operations at the Labour Party. It then has the message, and it says, email me on labourforkamala@gmail.com.
Yeah, well,
so it's
Gmail.
organised.
That's a Gmail. It's hardly an official Labour
the
account.
problem has become established because one of the two potential winners of the presidential race in America has felt so strongly about the actions of the Labour Party volunteers that he's actually got an official complaint against their election bureau on this. So
Jerome,
it's a big issue.
You shouldn't want to make more political hay out of this, because you and I both agree that we are allies. America and the UK are allies. Whichever of them wins,
Absolutely right.
Whether your party or my party had won the general election, we would both be doing the same thing, which is work with whoever wins. I think it's perfectly legitimate for people in their own time to go and campaign.
I agree with that.
Jerome, who would you like to win?
Look, I'm going to plead the fifth on that one.
Oh, come on.
And I think we should stay out.
I could say who I want to win. Kamala's my girl.
In the last few days on this programme, panellists keep saying, I can't offer an opinion on that. I saw it on the BBC this morning on Politics Live, Labour MP there, 3 times. I can't offer an opinion on that. What's the point of coming on programmes like this if you can't offer an opinion?
What is this story that we're asking about? It's about foreign intervention in an electoral process. So, particularly in relation to this story, I'm going to say it's up to the Americans.
It's door knocking. It's harmless door knocking.
And it's Kamala. I mean, one of the things that I'm excited about is a woman of colour. A woman and a woman of colour may end up being president of the United States in 2 weeks. She is an incredible woman, and I would love her to win. But also, as a politician, I think it's right that we say, I have a preference. I'm not a sitting politician, but I hope and I know that the Labour government will work with whoever wins.
I do think we also need to address the fact that, for me personally, Donald Trump winning is a huge concern because of what he has said explicitly about removing his support for Ukraine. And so we can't ignore that as an issue. I think anybody in their own time, on their own dime, going and door knocking in another country in a democratic election is fine. And I understand why Labour members or activists are out there doing that, because I think we all want to see not Donald Trump return to the White House.
I think your former colleague, Sir Robert Buckland, is out there knocking on doors
He
for
did
Kamala
say
Harris.
something like that.
I think that's true.
Katie?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to say here. I think from a political perspective, what it says to me is that the Labour Party is still in campaign mode and not in government mode. And we saw that a little bit with when the Transport Secretary got herself into trouble over P&O comments. And I think it's that mindset of actually what are we doing now? And we do need to behave differently. So I think from a politics perspective, there is that change that needs to happen. From a media perspective, I keep hearing people saying all day, this is not a story, it's a non-story. It's a non-story. Well, I'm afraid 2 weeks out of an American election, anything Trump says is going to be a story and it's going to lead the bulletins. So it's not a non-story for that. You can look at the facts and think, well, nothing to see here. But actually, Trump has criticised our new government and therefore it is a story and you're not going to get away with it.
It's a bigger problem than that, actually, because Keir Starmer's got quite a big problem if Donald Trump becomes the president, because it's not just his staffers who've got this problem, but it's also his foreign secretary and Stephen Doughty, the minister for North America. I mean, I've got some of their social media quotes about Donald Trump.
I've been doing your research.
Yeah, and it says, you are beneath contempt. That's our foreign secretary. That's a direct quote.
But that was when he wasn't foreign secretary, and he has had dinner with Donald Trump since.
Yeah, I bet that was pretty
Describing his describing himself as a small C Conservative. Now, aren't you horrified by that?
He did it. And I think that shows that, yes, Katy, you say that the Labour Party is taking a while to get into government mode and out of campaigning mode. I think after 14 years, we're also dealing with the fact that we've got an enormous mess to clear up of 14 years of Conservative government. But David Lammy went and had dinner with Donald Trump and Keir Starmer, and I think it behoves us all to make sure that we respect the alliance.
Katy, let me ask you a question. The Financial Times tweeted earlier, Labour paid for top Starmer aide to attend Democratic National Convention, as if this is some sort of scandal. Because you and I both know, well, in fact, all of us probably know, that all of the parties pay for one or two of their staff to go to both conventions. And yet the FT, of all papers, is trying to make this into something that makes a political party or a politician look bad. Now, I think that's a disgrace.
Well, I think it's a massively overwritten headline, isn't it? I mean, I stand by my point, really, in that I think Trump is like this sort of golden person for anyone that wants a story. Because he says all this stuff. And in the end, they know what they're doing. They're attacking the UK government for the reasons because it politically works for them. So, in that sense, we know what this is all about. And you'll see more of that. We will, in the next 2 weeks, anything that happens out of Donald Trump's mouth is going to be very, very high up the newspapers and in front of the papers. And in a sense, I think everyone's kind of got to accept that and, keep that in mind in terms of their analysis.
Jonathan Collett, who used to work for the Conservative Party, has tweeted, yes, the Conservative Party paid for me to attend the Republican convention in 2004. Nikki says, love cross question as always. However, how about having a business person on each night on your panel to show the Labour cabinet how it's done? Well, I think you qualify as a business person now, don't you, Katy?
I'm definitely happy with adding that onto my description, Ian. Add it all on.
I'm in business now.
Yeah.
Well, are you the only one that isn't, Jess?
Yeah, I'll accept the fact that I'm a full-time politician. Yes.
Good. Right. James, thank you very much for that question. We'll move on in just a moment. It's coming up to 8:15.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
8:15 on LBC. Former Labour MP Thangam Debbonaire is with us. Jerome Mayhew, Conservative Shadow Business Minister and MP for Broadland and Fakenham. Jess Brown-Fuller, Liberal Democrat MP for Chichester and their health spokeswoman. Do you like woman or person?
I'll take either,
Okay,
although technically I am hospitals and primary care rather than health and social care. So Helen Morgan is our spokesperson for them.
Katy Searle is a political and media commentator and is with Coulson Partners and was head of BBC Westminster. Right, here's a text question from Oscar in Camden. Tony Blair's think tank is telling Rachel Reeves to start charging motorists per mile because people are moving to electric cars and not paying the huge taxes on petrol or diesel. Would this be fair, or would it harm attempts to fight climate change and get people out of petrol and diesel vehicles? Well, this new report from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change says cars and vans should be charged 1 pence per mile, while heavy goods vehicles should be taxed 2.5 pence to 4 pence per mile. I wasn't aware that there were any heavy goods vehicles that were electric, but maybe I'm out of date on that. Katy, what do you think of that?
Well, I think this is just one of the latest ideas in order to solve the problem of the EV market. And really there's disparity between what government and political targets, not only in the UK, by the way, all over the world, want to see put in place, and the change that has brought on in electric vehicles and the car industry as a whole, and the reality of the situation. So whether this would change behaviour, I don't know. I don't suppose it would happen. But in terms of the general sense, what's happened really is that we've got a situation where everyone agrees we want to save, of course, we want to save the planet. But, how are you going to get there? There aren't the charging points. There aren't the cars that can be afforded. People aren't buying them. But the whole of the car industry feels that they've got to change the direction of where they're going. So it's left open, this gaping hole of the reality of the situation. And I think it's a brilliant example of where no one actually is having a honest political debate about what's happening in this area.
Jess.
And as Katy said, I think actually all of the motor industry are asking is just to know a timeline, because when the goalposts consistently move from government to government, they're never quite sure what they're meant to be doing. And Katy's absolutely right when she says, although we need to be being proactive in the transfer to EV, we're just not ready as a country to make that sudden transition. There are not enough EV charging points. We know we've got issues with the grid in general in being able to keep up with the large-scale infrastructure that we would need to be able to do that. So I think something that's come out of a think tank, I doubt Rachel Reeves is going to listen to it. I understand why they are putting it forward.
Particularly if it's just a week before the budget.
Exactly.
Jerome.
Yeah, well, I'm going to break with tradition and actually try and answer Oscar's direct question. I think the charging per mile, it sounds superficially attractive, and as a Conservative, maybe those who use it should pay more. But when you start digging under the surface, you start seeing all sorts of really difficult problems, like rural communities in particular, where there's a requirement to use road transport that's much greater than in urban communities. And when you look at that area, then it's the rural poor who scrape together enough to get by with a car because they need it for their employment or to function in their community, and they get hurt particularly badly by pay per mile. So while superficially attractive, I think actually it's not the right way to go, and a universal fee like road tax or maybe in several years to come a combination of the two might be a solution.
Because this idea, it's not an original one from the Tony Blair Institute. It's been around.
Yeah, it's been around for years.
I remember organising a conference on it like 1993 or something. So it's not new, but in a sense, it surely is fairer to charge people for what they use. But you would have to then surely change the road tax situation.
Yeah, you would.
Well.
You would. I mean, this would be a very major reform. I think that on the wider issue about the adoption of low carbon technologies, there's a real risk that if you push people and you use the stick rather than the carrot to get people to adopt new lower carbon technologies, what you actually end up doing is getting a big pushback. So from constituents of mine who on the doorstep were describing environmental policies as green crap, that is a growing feeling of frustration from people who are being lectured to by the metropolitan elite as they see it, and they're not being listened to, and they're having their quality of life adversely affected without being brought along on the journey. I think it's very important that all political parties, whatever their colour, think about bringing normal people who aren't focusing on politics every day of their lives, but bring them along on the journey as to why a new technology might be better for them, not just impose it upon them.
Sandeep has the answer here. He says, I reckon you should be charged depending on how much you weigh. If you weigh more, then the car will burn more emissions. LOL, indicating the tongue firmly in cheek. Thangam.
Well, I'm going to break with tradition as well and agree with Jerome, and that you need to bring well on a point of principle and values, because I think climate change is a clear and present danger. I think everybody here would agree with that. And there's lots of things we need to do. There is a problem with the electric vehicle market. There are several problems with the electric vehicle market which have been covered by others, and I will also break with tradition and not repeat something that's already been said. But I think bringing people with you is important, because actually that renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy we have, and it will bring better jobs and it will help with our energy security. But if we don't invest in getting the grid right and bring the public with us, then we will lose people and then we will lose momentum. We actually don't have time to lose. We do need to think, and in response to the question, we are going to need to think, where will we get the lost tax income from? Because if we do want cars to go electric, as well as installing more charging points, we will have to decide as a country, well, where's the money coming from? Because the public wants this government to fix public services. It's one of the things that the polling keeps saying, is that they want the Labour government to fix public services. That doesn't come with nothing. You have to do things in a different way. You know, Wes Streeting, for instance, as Health Secretary, said that comes with reforms, but it also takes money. And if we are going to lose tax receipts from the charging for electric vehicles not paying the same in tax, we are going to need to think about how we do that. And I think to do it by bringing people with you is always better.
But this is where we start to disagree again, is the current government's, in my view, absolutely crazy and wholly unachievable undertaking to decarbonise the grid by 2030. If you talk to any expert, literally any expert in the field, they say that is physically impossible. And by going hell for leather for this, you're going to rack up enormous costs. And then those costs, where we're told before the election it's going to reduce costs by £300 on an electricity bill, rubbish. Where's the evidence of that? It's not there. It's actually going to increase electricity bills, and it's going to lead to this huge pendulum swing against
Jerome, one of the reasons the Labour government has to act with urgency is because the previous Tory government had an effective moratorium on onshore wind, which is literally the cheapest form of energy production there is. If you hadn't had that moratorium, we'd be so much further ahead, and we're going to have to catch up fast. I think ambition is vital. We only have one planet. We are going to have to do everything we can to save it. And if we only aimed for 2050 and we missed it, that would be too late. Aiming for 2030 is vital.
OK. Pedant of the night goes to Dan from Gainsborough, who says, just to remind you all, there is no such thing as road tax. It's vehicle excise duty and goes into general taxation. Well done, Dan.
Yeah.
Sort of. Jay is in Harrow. Hello, Jay.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
Hi. Very well, thank you. What would you like to say?
Quick question for the panel. What I wanted to ask was, if there was a situation where one of my relatives was arrested for a crime, or even maybe, for example, shot dead by a police officer for a crime, and I needed the help of the police 4 years down the road, or 2 years down the road, does the panel think that I shouldn't have the right to know the name of that officer if I am a victim of a crime and I need to call the police and need the police's help, because after all, I'm a citizen of the UK and we've all got the same rights. So obviously I'm protected under the law like everybody else. If I need to call the police, I honestly believe that I should know if that officer was involved in the death of my son, my sister, or whoever else.
We get what you mean, Jay. Now, the Home Secretary has announced plans to give armed police who are charged with offences allegedly carried out while they were on duty will be given anonymity unless and until they're convicted, following the acquittal of Martin Blake, who was tried for murder over the shooting dead of leading gang member Chris Carber. Jerome Mayhew.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of sympathy with the Home Secretary's position on this. I think we ask armed officers in particular to do an incredibly difficult job, and they willingly put themselves in harm's way in very dangerous situations on behalf of society as a whole. We see it in Parliament that we have armed officers who have put their lives on the line to protect parliamentarians, and this all stems obviously from the recent court case with Mr. Kober. I think they should, armed police officers should work under exactly the same law as the rest of us. They should be prosecuted if there's evidence to suggest that they have breached their duty of care. But I think there are exceptional circumstances in the nature of the activity that we ask them to undertake on our joint behalves, that perhaps anonymity until they've been convicted might be sensible, particularly when they're dealing with gangland crimes where their own lives are put very much at risk if they're named in advance.
Given the fact that the CPS clearly knew of Chris Cubber's gang background, why did the judge then say that Martin Blake's name could be released, do you think? I mean, it seems very odd.
Look, I'm a former barrister, so I practiced for 10 years before becoming an entrepreneur and then going into politics. The person best placed to make a decision like that is the judge, because they have all the evidence, both for and against, and so I'm not even going to start second guessing the decision of a judge in a real case, because that would be quite inappropriate. For a politician to do, but also we should give respect for our judicial processes, and where you have a judge who's in a much better place than the rest of us as mere commentators, we should respect that and say, okay, I've followed their decision.
Jess.
Thank you. The courts, absolutely, as Jerome said, need to be able to follow judicial process without political interference. And I totally recognise that the last few days will have been really difficult, especially for Chris Cubber's family and friends who have been waiting for a long time for this judgment, and it won't have been the outcome that they hoped for. I think it speaks to a wider picture, though, that I think Jay was alluding to in his call, which is it sounds like Jay's lost faith in the police. And so the government have a duty to work with the police to try and build back that trust in policing, and especially for our black and ethnic minority communities who feel like with this ruling, they just can't trust the police.
Why would they feel that, though, in this particular case, given Chris Cubber's background?
I think it's not just this case. I think it's historically.
No, but I accept for other cases, but particularly this one, now that we know what an evil person he was, I can't imagine any right-minded person, whether they're black, white, whatever, would have a huge amount of sympathy with. I mean, the families in these situations will always want to defend the honour of of their family member who's been killed. I completely get that. But for everybody else, really?
You are absolutely right, but I think it does speak to a wider problem, which is that people of all colours have lost faith in the police.
Thangam.
I mean, I think what Jay's speaking to here is that picture of some lack of trust in the police. And it is possible for trust in the police to go up as well as down. Neil Basu, who is doing quite a lot of media, former Chief Commissioner in the police. I'm mixing up my police officers now. But serious point, he made the point that the trust in the police has been low in the past and gone up again if people work at it. And I think that's really important. It isn't just this particular case. There have been some other notable ones. Now, most police officers do an incredible job. I absolutely agree. And I have police officers in my family. They put their lives on the line. They do things which the rest of us would never have to do. They run towards awful situations when the rest of us would not. Yeah. But unfortunately, there are some police, and it is only some, who have done bad things in the line of their own duty. And that unfortunately does include some very high profile cases, which I don't particularly want to name, that have given women and girls, for example, a fear that they can't trust the very person that they should be able to turn to if they themselves are afraid of being a victim of crime. I think it's really important in a democracy that we respect the division between the legislature and the judiciary. Right. That's part of the rule of law, which we all believe in. And I think that's one of the things that marks us out as a country. I understand how Jay's anxiety, and I think that's important to acknowledge as well. And I think that the police have got a job of work to do to regain trust that has been lost. But it's important that we do not tar all police with one thing, because most police officers are doing a very, very difficult job very well.
Katy.
Yeah, one of the things I do now in my new role is we look at people's reputations. And to pick up that point, the police have got a lot of work to do, and they just haven't done it, and they haven't done it fast enough. And this has been the same as any of us can remember. It's been like this for years and years and years. Mark Rowley has got a huge job on his hands, but frankly, he's not acting quick enough either. And, they need to go back to basics and really look at how they rebuild their reputation more broadly.
Yeah, but going back to this particular case, it's not just the judiciary, but thank goodness we have a jury system.
Yes.
Because this is 12 people of our peers judging, looking at the evidence and forming a common sense judgment on it. And I'm just really grateful that we have that safety valve, which is all the evidence is put before the common man, the common woman, and they are guided, obviously, by the judicial process, but that we rely and trust on our peers to make these really important judgments, and I think they've done a good job.
Do you think we also ought to discuss the fact that there are some people, and I would say predominantly on the left, who, whenever there is a case like this where the police are involved in a shooting, and particularly if it's someone from an ethnic minority, the assumption is that the police are at fault. And you hear that time and time again. And even last night, when we knew what the background was and we knew all the details and we saw a lot of the evidence that the jury had seen, even last night, I was still getting people on the text screen here saying, "Oh yeah, but the police." People pretend to understand the nuances of a case when they haven't been in court. Yeah. And they just automatically rush to judgment against the police. That's insidious, isn't it?
I think it's a problem as well when people don't trust the fact that we actually have a process. So the process in this case must have been incredibly painful for a lot of people, not least Martin Blake himself. And this is an example of the process worked because evidence was placed in front of the jury, in front of the judge, in front of the Crown Prosecution Service initially. And they made a decision that there was a case to answer. The case was then answered. I think there is a problem. It is not left-wing, in my view, not to want the police.
Labour MP Kim Johnson has today claimed that the coverage of this has been full of racist gang tropes. I mean, seriously.
I mean, I think it is not left-wing not to want the people that you represent to be protected, and the people that we asked to protect us are the police. And people I represented wanted someone to be able to call when there was danger, when there was somebody at their door that was trying to get in, or they'd been burgled. Everybody most people I know understand that we have in this country we have a remarkable system of policing by consent, and that's why the public trust is so important, because it only operates with public trust. And unfortunately, high-profile, terrible cases, as happened a few years ago, in particular with murder and rape of several, of one woman in particular. I think that's Sarah Everard. I think Sarah Everard's case made a lot of women very fearful, but that doesn't mean that all police are bad or all police are going to do the same thing. The opposite. But unfortunately, it does matter that we have a system where the police recognise what that's done to public trust and do what they need to do to regain that.
Okay.
Well, and I think the government plays a role in that as well.
Yes.
Because the government have got a huge job on their hands because they have a huge court backlog. So we want to see justice for victims of crimes. Yeah. They've got 3 out of 4 burglaries going unsolved. So they need to get a grip on that. We've got offenders being let out of prison early with no probation system to hold them up. Wow. There's so much for the government to do.
Agreed.
OK, we have to move on because we're late for the news. It's 8:34. Let's get the news headlines on LBC from Daryl Jackson.
Police say they're investigating a suspected carbon monoxide leak following the deaths of 3 people at a care home in Dorset. 7 people have also been taken to hospital after emergency services were called to the building in Swanage. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley's welcomed the announcement that officers facing trial over police shootings will remain anonymous unless convicted. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says it's vital they're not put in danger during legal proceedings. And 4 people have been killed and 14 others injured in an apparent terror attack at the headquarters of a defence and aerospace company in Ankara. The Turkish president's described it as a vile attack. LBC weather dry for England and Wales tonight. Patchy rain in northwest Scotland and a low of 7 degrees.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
Keep your calls coming, 0345 6060 973. And a text here from Jim who says, is the water industry in need of a much stronger regulator or maybe just nationalisation? Now, the government has announced a review of the water sector which could lead to the regulator Ofwat having greater powers or even being abolished and replaced. One of the ideas being put forward would see water companies becoming not-for-profit companies. Well, obviously, Jess, this has been a big issue for the Liberal Democrats with your sewage campaign, which was a great hit in the general election.
Absolutely.
What's your view?
Delighted to be speaking about it again. I've been in a Westminster Hall debate today about sewage. I've been in the Commons talking about sewage. So
I don't know why it always makes me smile. When
it's nice to finish my day with sewage as well.
It's such an obvious joke here, but I'm not going to.
So my feeling is, and the Liberal Democrats' feeling is, that today they've announced this water commission, where they're going to go out and spend a year talking to people when they already know what that commission is going to come back and say, which is the regulator is not fit for purpose, it doesn't have teeth, it's not achieving what it needs to achieve. And rather than spending a year kicking the proverbial can down the road, they can actually just get on and introduce the reforms that are necessary. And the Lib Dems in the Lords have tabled some amendments to the water bill that's currently with them. And we want to see those amendments brought forward, which would speed up this process to stop sewage being dumped into our rivers and waterways.
Is your preference to give Ofwat more powers, or do you think they should be abolished and start again?
I think we need a tough new regulator that's actually got teeth. I mean, the prime example is Ofwat imposed fines back in November 2021 to 3 water companies, totalling 168 million, and not a penny has currently been paid by any of those water companies to Ofwat. It's not working. The system is not working, so we would introduce a new regulator that actually had teeth.
Thangam.
Well, I mean, Jess mentioned a water bill, and I want to think about the fact that all of us pay water bills, and we have been paying for profits that have not been used to invest in our water system, and I think it's outrageous. I want to see the water companies actually clean up their mess, and I think that there's a fundamental principle here, which is they are responsible. On one level, I do want the regulator to have more teeth. I absolutely do, and I personally think I don't get why anyone's going to believe in Ofwat ever again for the reasons that have been mentioned. But I also think the companies have just got damn cheek, because they know perfectly well what the problems are, and they've been sitting on it and sitting on it and sitting on it. And here we go in this awful doom loop of our water bills go up. We are paying for not a good system. I don't think that nationalisation is the answer, and for the same reason, actually. I do not want us to spend any more of our money, and it would cost a lot of money, take time, and we just fed up. People are fed up of having to think about what's coming up on the beaches or in the rivers. We need to see clean water, and I don't get why the water companies don't get that. Is their fundamental raison d'etre. That's what they're there for, to provide us with clean water and not to dump bad stuff in our rivers.
Katy?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things here. I think, investment is key to this, and it just hasn't been done. And it hasn't been done, again, for years and years and years. And this money has gone missing, and it's not been invested to fix the pipes that need to be fixed. And it's as simple as that. In terms of the regulator, I kind of think with these things, call it another name. Actually, that's not really the point, is it? All you're going to do is waste a lot of money shutting something down and reopening it. It's got to be something that works. So depend what it, call it what you like, but actually just give it the powers that actually makes a difference, but also put the people in that can really carry out the changes that are needed for the long term.
This would be a great idea for your focus newsletters, Jess. New name for Ofwat. I can think of a couple now, and I'm sure Katy can as well. Jerome?
Look, I'm not an apologist for the water companies, but I do want to put some facts into this debate, which is that they did provide vast amounts of private sector investment from privatisation. About £190 billion of private money went in, which, had it been nationalised during that period, they would probably have had the same sort of level of capex as it had, capital investment rather, as it had in the 70s when it was nationalised. And we have got much better water quality now than we had even 30 years ago. There's been a lot of muck thrown, particularly by the Liberal Democrats, but joined in by Labour before the last election. But there was The Guardian led with a comment piece just in September saying, if you look at the Oxford professor for freshwater ecology, she said, in fact, water quality has improved markedly in our rivers over the last 30 years. What's changed?
But how do we know? Because it wasn't measured 30 years ago.
And that's why you go to an ecologist, because you measure the invertebrate life in our rivers, which is very water sensitive. So she was looking at caddisflies and mayflies, which have tripled in their abundance. And that is a very good invertebrate indicator of water quality. So that's where she's coming
I think she may be one of the only ecologists that would argue that our rivers are in good condition. I've spoken to multiple, and I will not make any apologies for the Liberal Democrats bringing this to the forefront of the conversation, because it should be, and people are quite rightly disgusted. And when you look at my constituency of Chichester, where you've got chalk streams like the Lavant and the Ems, they are both in awful condition. You've got over-abstraction on the Ems, which means it's drying up and all the fish are lying on the banks dying, and there's no ecosystem there. And then in the Lavant, you've got absolutely no small invertebrates because of the levels of sewage that are being dumped into the water. Chichester Harbour is in an unfavourable declining condition because of the levels of sewage that Southern Water have put in it.
So what we have seen, if you look at the facts as opposed to the emotion, is we've got more information. We've got more information because the Conservative government said we've got to look at storm overflow monitors. Under Labour, it was just 7% of overflows were monitored. Now it's 100%. So we've got a ton more information, which is giving this suggestion that water quality has got worse. It hasn't. It's not good enough. And I'm not, as I said, I'm not an apologist for water companies. They do plenty of things wrong and they need to be held to account. But to say that, therefore, water quality overall has been declining over the last 30 years is simply not factually correct. It has been getting better.
I would just ask you to go away and look at the number of hours that sewage was dumped compared to 2022 into 2023. In 2023, the number increased dramatically, and yet we had no excess rainfall in 2023 compared to 2022. So there is a problem.
There's definitely a problem. There is definitely a problem.
In using storm
overflows. What you've got to do is you've got to have, this is a problem that goes back to the Victorian era. This is not a recent problem, and it's to do with the fundamental design of our sewage and surface water drainage. And yeah, we can take a decision, which the last government did, that we're going to invest hugely in this. But we've got the water companies already signed up to £56 billion of investment over the next 25 years to improve this. And if you go much faster than that, what are you going to do? You're just going to drive up water prices because that money has to come from somewhere.
They're asking for that anyway. They asked the water regulator to put our bills up again. I mean, I think that's something that makes people very fed up.
But Labour's swallowing that. So Labour said, OK, you can go up by 21%, I think it is. And then Thames Water has just come back, I think, today and said, no, we need to be up over 50%.
But also, they're not telling their story, right? You know, they've got a real problem.
They need you.
They do need me immediately. But no,
they should all sack all of their comms departments for that because they're utterly useless.
It's extraordinary that they, time after again, you know, they are in the news as not doing any of this, and the bills are going up and up and up. And
I think in the last 2 minutes, I've done a better job for the water companies than they have in the last 2 years. I don't even work for them.
And also, to be clear, it's not those that work for them, because actually there are genuinely good people in water companies, in the regulator, in the Environment Agency that are actually trying to do the best thing that they possibly can.
Here's an open invitation. If anybody who's a chief executive or senior manager at a water company wishes to come on this programme, whether it's cross-question or we have people maybe from 2 or 3 water companies taking questions from callers, open invitation to you. You know how to get in touch.
Great idea.
Imran in Reading says, is there any chance that you lot might discuss or air a question about the massacres taking place in Jabalah and northern Gaza generally? As the genocide has intensified, Iain Dale's coverage of the topic has inversely dwindled to a full-scale silence. Well, I think that's quite unfair, actually, Imran, because we've covered this subject in quite a lot of detail on the programme over several months, admittedly not in the last couple of weeks. But if you'd like to phone in and ask a question, you know what to do. Or even just send a text question, because you sent that. It's not really a question, is it? Apart from to me. 8:46.
LBC Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:49, Thangam, Debbonaire, Jerome, Mayhew, Jess, Brown, Fuller and Katy Searle are with me taking your calls. Robert is in Hammersmith. Hello, Robert.
Is that Iain Dale?
It certainly is.
Thank you very much for taking my call. As I explained earlier, I'm talking about manufacturing in the UK and the benefits of what that can give to the economy, the people, and the general feeling of goodwill. I'll give you a bit of background.
We haven't got time for a lot of background, Robert. If you can just get to your question.
It's a very short one, but it's important. At 16 years old, I went to sea. I went to Sunderland to sail on one of the last ships that was built in Sunderland. We went through hurricanes and tornadoes on that ship all around the world. It was a British-built ship, and it was the best. Now then.
No, Robert, I need to get to your question. We haven't got time for no doubt, a very interesting story, but I need your question.
Okay. We're talking about environmentally friendly reductions. We're talking about emissions reductions. When you consider all these different considerations, you're talking about money. It costs money.
Robert, I need your question for the third time. 3 strikes and you're out, I'm afraid. What's your question?
Okay, should we become a manufacturing industry and stand around and think, build communities, build towns, and build real business?
Right. So, to sum that up, why don't we go back to manufacturing as a way to boost the economy and create jobs? I think that's the essence of it. Katy, let's start with you.
Yes, in principle. I mean, I think, of course, we're talking about growing our economy, but in the end, our economy is driven by its service industry. But, probably one for the politicians more likely than me. But, all growth is good growth. Thangam.
She'll certainly agree with that. All right, well, let's add another aspect into this. Britain is the 9th biggest manufacturing nation in the world, yet nobody seems to recognise this. Everybody thinks that we basically shut down our entire manufacturing sector, and it's not true. Why is it, Thangam, that industry in general doesn't shout about this a bit more?
I don't know, and I wish they would. But I think also the nature of industry has changed. I mean, Robert mentioned shipbuilding, and we don't have the shipbuilding industry that we once did. A lot of the labour on the shipbuilding trade was very insecure and not necessarily the jobs of the future. I think we do have a good manufacturing industry, but it's taken new forms. So, for instance, in South Wales, we now have a massive creative industries sector that is growing, and they have an ambition to be the equivalent of the coal mining and the steel industry of the future, with great, secure, long-term jobs that can go through generation to generation, making beautiful, exciting things. That's also a form of manufacturing. It's making things. I think also we are going to need people in manufacturing doing good, skilled jobs to build what we need for the renewable industry. But we will also have new jobs in the AI, digital and tech sectors, and we need to be training young people to take an open approach to what sort of jobs they might be doing in 10, 20 years' time, because they probably don't exist yet and we don't know what they are. So creating a good knowledge economy is just as important as building the skills. We will always need skills, and we will need people who can think and reason and work in teams, and we need all of that in our future economy. And yes, growth is good. That's how we pay for the stuff. It's how we pay for the stuff.
Jess.
We absolutely are a manufacturing country, and I spent the morning with a group of innovators, including the company that manufactured, don't ask me what they're called, but the kind of constant insulin that people
I have
now
one
wear.
on my arm
you have one
right now.
on your arm.
Would you like to know what my reading is now?
I'd love to because I spent
9.6.
Is that
there
good?
You are.
Is that where you should be?
It should be under 10, so I'm just there.
You're just on
but
the
it gives you a little graph as to where you are over the course of the day.
So the company,
you met the people that invented it?
I met the people that 80% of those with type 1 diabetes are using their device.
Type 2, but...
Oh, okay. So we are an innovative country, we are manufacturing.
Did you ask them to reduce the cost of them?
I did not.
Because they are quite prohibitive. Because if you're type 1, you can get them on the NHS.
And if you're
type 2, it's basically 25 quid a week. Which is,
Wow.
I mean, it's well worth it to monitor it and make sure it keeps in check. But, I mean, I can afford that. But so many people won't be able to afford 25 quid a week. Jerome?
Yeah, so absolutely we should be supporting manufacturing. And the kind of manufacturing that the caller was talking about was actually heavy industry. The reason why we're not big in heavy industry any longer is because it's dependent on the cost of energy. And if you increase the cost of energy, as we have done, because of environmental policies, then you design yourself out of being big in industry like this. And you've got a choice. We still emit, but we do it by importing high energy intensive manufactured processes from abroad. Now, that doesn't help the environment, because it's a global issue. It just costs jobs in this country.
But why is it that, for example, a company that I'm involved with, they import forestry machinery, sort of stump grinders, things like that, from all over Europe? We don't have any manufacturers of this equipment in this country anymore, and that's not heavy. Well, it is heavy manufacturing to a degree. But you think, well, if they can do it in Italy, I mean, Italy, Germany, and France are the three main countries where they're imported from. Why isn't there somebody here thinking, well, here's a market opportunity. Yeah. We don't need to import all of this stuff. We can produce it here.
Well, as a free marketeer, I think we should exploit our natural advantages, and actually. Forestry probably isn't one of our natural advantages because you've got much larger forestry estates in mainland Europe than you do in the UK. So personally, I've got no problem with importing stump grinding machinery, but there'll be other areas where we have a natural competitive advantage and we should be supporting it. But it does come down to the cost of your inputs. So that is very substantially around energy, and we've dropped the ball on that.
Right, let's just fit in this question from Ellie in Manchester. The number of people dying after taking cocaine is up by a third, with people in their 40s the most likely to be affected. Why is this happening, and would legalisation stop so many people dying young? New figures from the Office for National Statistics have shown that deaths from drug poisoning across England and Wales are at their highest for 30 years, with cocaine deaths last year almost 10 times what they were a decade before. Men in their 40s are the most likely group to die from drug misuse. I don't know if any of you have got any particular expertise in this area, but you're all shaking your head.
Well, I'm happy. I've got a view. I'm not an expert on this, but I think the question was, would legalisation or being soft on drugs help that? And the answer from the data is unequivocally no. It actually exacerbates it. If you look at the experience in America, but also you don't even have to go that far. Go and look at Scotland. So Scotland has had a notoriously soft approach to drugs and drugs enforcement, and they are the drugs deaths capital of Europe, I'm ashamed to say. So the evidence very strongly
and by
suggests,
a country mile.
Yeah, by a country mile. So the evidence really overwhelmingly suggests that going soft on drugs, giving up, essentially, and consigning people to lives of misery is not effective.
But you refer to the American regime, and of course cocaine is not legal in America, and neither's, and the drugs deaths in Scotland are mostly to do with heroin and crack. I mean, there are different regimes for different drugs, and that's because there's different levels of harm. One of the most harmful drugs we have is entirely legal, and it's called alcohol. And we accept that socially, even though we know it will cost the health service billions, and we know it will cost people in lost years of life and in quality of life, and is often a contributory factor to violence and social problems. So I think we need a thoughtful approach to drugs, and it's got to look at where the harm lies, and that is a harm. That is people dying young. Cocaine is a dangerous drug, as is heroin, which is what's killing people in Scotland.
Jess.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's clearly a public health issue, yes, as well as a drug issue. So getting that under control is so important. Nobody should be dying young from.
But it's also the problem there is that if people are criminalised from using, then they are less likely to seek help. I think we need a thoughtful approach which treats it as a public health issue, but also goes after people who are exploiting vulnerable people and just being absolutely awful criminals who are using violence and exploitation to make a lot of money off other people's misery. They're the ones I want to go for.
Katy.
Just one thing to add really is looking at the deaths around young males or 40-year-old males, which is a really important point of this conversation, but much wider.
Malcolm in Bodmin, who's a regular correspondent, Jerome, he says, the Tory MP is making up statistics, Iain. Is he the MP for Broadland and Fakenham?
Great line.
See what we did there.
I just thought I'd add that in.
Not sure which stat he says I've got wrong.
And I think he was tongue-in-cheek. Well, I think he was. Angela in Bury St Edmunds for our fun question. Travel guide Lonely Planet has described East Anglia as enigmatic, as it listed it among the top 10 regions to visit in the entire world. It listed a nature reserve in Suffolk as one of the must-see places there. Where in your local area deserves attention from the rest of the world, and why? Well, let's start with the MP for Chichester, because, I mean, that is a beautiful constituency, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it would be, we were discussing it before the show, but I'm going to go for, and it's very hard to choose in Chichester because there are so many wonderful things about it, but I'm going to go for Chichester Festival Theatre if you want something to be world-renowned because of the incredible work that theatre is pumping out, a lot of which ends up in the West End, and they've had you on their stage as well, Ian.
Yes.
So they clearly only go for a top
Hosting
calibre.
A Night with Anne Widdecombe many, many years ago. Katy Searle.
Well, I'm clearly going to win. So I'm a resident of Chiswick in West London.
Are you?
And I'm very, very lucky to live near
So you're
the
going to
Thames.
nominate James O'Brien's house?
Occasionally see him in the High Street. I'm going to nominate the Dove pub, which has one of the best views down the beautiful River Thames, and also is just one of the oldest pubs in London.
Is this just a way of blagging a free drink?
Yes. I hope I've succeeded.
Well, they can listen back on Global Player. Thangam.
Well, I'm kind of a bit movable feast at the moment because I used to represent Bristol, where there's the fantastic Bristol
But
Old
now
Vic.
you're going to tell us
But now
it's
I
very
live
ugly.
I'm full-time in London. No, I
Do
still
you?
love Bristol, yes.
Do you really?
Completely. And so my local theatre actually is Sadler's Wells, which is an absolute dream for me. It's one of my favourite places in the world. I used to want to be a ballet dancer when I was
I saw
a very
Sound of
little
Music
girl.
there.
Did you see The Sound of Music? Well, I last week saw Theatre of Dreams, which was an incredible production for people who don't like ballet or think they don't like ballet. They would have loved it. It was brilliant. We even all ended up dancing ourselves as the audience. They swept
God.
us up.
Remind me never to go there.
Not with me then, if you're not going to
Jerome.
dance.
Well, Ian, I know you agree with me because you've chosen to live in my constituency.
Yes, exactly.
It is gorgeous, and I'm going to focus on the Norfolk Broads, which are absolutely beautiful, and they're great to visit, preferably by boat. And then I'm going to cheat a little bit and just go slightly over the border into North Norfolk. There's a boatyard called Hunter's Yard, which is a charity, and it has the 1930s half fleet of Blakes. So these are wooden yachts, mahogany yachts, which have never been upgraded and they don't have engines. And you can hire them and go off and sail in the Broads. And it's the most magical experience.
That's lovely.
It is lovely.
You've sold it.
I
You've sold
endorse
it.
that message from Jerome Mayhew. Thank you to all four of you for coming on the programme tonight. Monday's panel includes the Conservative peer and sepsis survivor, Lord Craig McKinley. Really looking forward to having him on the programme. Lib Dem MP Pippa Halings, is that how I pronounce it?
It is indeed,
thank
yes.
goodness for that. And the journalist and policy analyst David Goodhart. So do tune in at 8 o'clock on Monday for that. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk Donald Trump. It's based on this story about Labour Party staffers going to campaign for Kamala Harris, but I don't really want to go into that. We kind of did that last night. But I do want to ask what implications this has for our relations with a Trump presidency. If Donald Trump wins, and an increasing number of people think he is going to win the presidential election in less than 2 weeks' time, what would that mean for Britain's relations with the United States? I remember asking this question before the presidential election of 2016, not really believing that Donald Trump could win. Well, he really could win a second term. What would it mean for the United Kingdom? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, police investigating the deaths of 3 people at a care home in Swanage say potential carbon monoxide poisoning is their primary line of inquiry. They're treating the deaths as unexplained. 7 people at the Gainsborough care home have been taken to hospital. Darren Langdown from Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service explains how emergency teams responded.
We have had a number of crews on scene since around 8 o'clock this morning, supporting the response and the subsequent investigation. Potential carbon monoxide poisoning is the primary line of inquiry, although investigations are continuing.
4 people have been killed following an attack on a state-run defence company in Turkey. Local media is reporting an explosion and gunshots fired at the site on the outskirts of the capital, Ankara.